Quiet feels good. Comfortable silence. Nothing to say, nothing to do, just simply being here. Experiencing a moment as it is, rather than as it should be, or what we wish it would be, just simply as it is. But realizing that the moment as it is has a multitude of options. Not what we are predefining as an opportunity, but rather within that same arena of just is. So we have always this option that I think sometimes can be a little bit confusing at first to the experiencer. Potentially a question arises of, oh wait, I actually have a choice. I actually have an option. And the answer is most definitely yes. So within the moments that you're sitting here quiet, without anything really to do other than listening, what is it that you're experiencing within this moment? Not as something that can be defined often through the logic of one's mind, but rather what is truly just experienced by the individual and the mind. Now this form of inquiry is further developed through trust. Trusting that there is something which is beyond the individual who is engaging with the mind, who is under the position of feeling that one has to choose or one has to define that which they are experiencing. One has to predefine that which one is experiencing. So the objective is to soften the hold of the control and then give it away. But we have to be very mindful as to what we are giving this control over to. So what is it then that one gives a control over to? Not necessarily what an external individual could define, but more importantly, what you then are connecting to as that something which you feel comfortable to let go the control over to. And I'm framing it this way because this is meditation. Meditation is providing the avenue, the opportunity to explore how to let go and how to trust. So now this information is supported, of course, through the wisdom tradition, which has been around for a very long time. And wisdom traditions have always upheld that there is something higher than that which is your operating mind. And I feel probably most people in the room immediately could say true. Yes, that's right. But how many of us in this room are saying yes, true, that's right, because we heard it from another, rather than experienced it directly for ourselves? And if one truly has experienced it for themselves in such a way that they can create the trust bond which is necessary to fully trust, well then I think this is an absolute transformation for an individual to have. Because in that moment in time, we're able to let go of all of the smaller decision making that we feel is so important, which often is not so ridiculously important, but yet holds a lot of stress potentially, or weight to it, holding one down, weighing one down. So in that effect, it is a worthwhile exploration. But at the same time, we want to ensure that there's a transformative quality that is enabled. Since this is what the wisdom traditions have been telling us for so many years. And I don't frame this to be confrontational in any way. I frame it in this way because ideally what we are gaining is an opportunity of proof. We must, in my opinion, have full proof in order to trust. So that proof is no longer any shadows of any doubt remaining within one's mind. That's the full proof, which then offers full trust. But within that, we can share percentages of trust as we get percentages of truth. And now, this is not me being stingy with my trust. This is me being very pragmatic, rhythmic, with how I inquire into myself. Because truly that is the element that I must connect to in order to analyze my environment, is it not? The environment being both this inner landscape, but also this outer landscape. Within the inner experience and within the outer experience, this higher form of consciousness exists. It remains constant beyond all of our ebbing and flowing, through all of the variables up and down, the incredible highs and the incredible lows, the intense joy and the potential for sorrow. So in that, this creative intelligence, which is a higher form than that which my mind is operating under, is that much more patient than I am, is that much more loving than I am, is that much more willing to go the extra moments in time in order to convince the individual who is the student that they have what it takes in order to establish a full depth of understanding, using that what they've been given, their body, their breath, their mind, to then connect to the proof that they need, that I need, in order to give over that trust. And I believe strongly that this is the position that we're in. As individuals, yes, on different varying scales of trust, but also as a collective. So we don't know for sure, without shadows of doubt, that there is something beyond the borders of your thinking mind, until it has been given to you and proven to you. But the solidifying agent within the wisdom tradition is that you or me as the individual must do, must act, must engage in order to see this proof come to fruition, because it's all built on the inside. In this particular avenue of inquiry and development, it's not enough just to simply pray and say, I wish, I hope. But rather, it's designed to give absolute understanding through the action of one developing a quality of space. Developing a quality of space means to become so incredibly connected to the moment as it's occurring. Just right now, this moment, as it's occurring. And creating that as our foundational piece, which then enables the rest of the inquiry to occur. And the reason for that is because we must marginalize the storyline Even though storytelling is so incredibly important, but we must marginalize this storyline that is no longer true. So that then as it becomes more quiet, we have greater growing space. And that space we use as the opportunity to really become skilled at feeling this moment as it's occurring. Because what's within this moment right now? Can you tell yourself? Is there characteristics about this moment? Does it feel good? Does it feel grounded? Does it feel light? And as you're observing this moment in time, can you recognize whether or not you've seen or felt this moment before? Just this one. In the recent to distant past. And whether or not the experience that you're having this moment, which then you can define as being present in other previous moments, if that is actually a constant that is potentially there, that your mind, the way that you use your mind, is actually the variable that is weaving in and out. Does this make sense? So it could be you, it could be me as the individual who is actually weaving in and out. Not willing yet to be a part of this constant, a part of this higher form of self, higher form of mind, a greater form of consciousness than what you have. And that's okay. Nobody said you had to be the heavyweight within all of this. Actually, it's been said that you have the privilege of being the lightweight. I have the privilege of being the lightweight. We are the students. So in that, it is our opportunity to not know who we are or where we're going or why we're here fully. And ideally, we should take comfort within that. But what I'm speaking on is this gaining ability to be just simply okay with this moment as it's occurring. And take the finger off the panic button. Take the finger off the aggression button. Take the finger off the why me button. Take your fingers off all of the buttons. And then see what happens. And that's what meditation does. That's what meditation is asking. But in its request, that's what meditation is teaching. Just like this higher form of consciousness, as we understand it today as a human species, this consciousness is asking us to engage, asking us to get to know it. But it's not just giving the request, it's giving the opportunity to show us how to do that. This something that I'm speaking of is within the space between you and I. It's what you breathe in your nose with. So that, in fact, you are continuously connected. The quality of breath works the same way as this moment, because as the moment is arising, as you're engaging with it, you're also inhaling or exhaling. So this constant of inhale-exhale is actually matching the constant in theory and in ideal to this creative energy, which is higher than this operating mind that I have. So within my logic, I say, how many ways contained within this body can I stay connected to the rhythms that exist with this higher form of consciousness without having to think about it all the time? And that's the work, that's the joy, to develop an ability to do that. And I offer the observation tool of space. So space between you and I is filled with this higher form of consciousness. The space inside of every individual is filled with this higher form of consciousness. Everything is actually operating with the nucleus of this higher form of consciousness. So therefore, if I can develop a quality of space which is completely aware of that, meaning my entire sensory system is connected, the taste, the feel, everything, all of the senses connected to this quality of space. Now, how well can I relax into that? So now, if we move forward with this and now take it outside of the individual and into the plural individuals that then we are engaging with throughout the day, well, then it means the same thing. If we follow the stream of wisdom tradition that has been coming through for thousands of years, you are also all a part of this higher form of consciousness. I'm not talking about your operating mind, the one that is asking and receiving and looking and wondering, but I'm talking about the quality of space that exists there. Not the storyline, but the space itself. So as one strengthens within meditation, we're not only enabling ourselves to see through the storylines that we produce within oneself, but we can also see the storylines as they're being produced within another. Not for the sake of being better than that other, but for the sake of aiding in the development of oneself and the other. Not to point it out, but to simply consciously decide. Just like within meditation, consciously deciding that moment and the experience, that thread of sensation that is coming towards you. Does that make sense? As you engage with another, there's so many opportunities to sidestep into this feeling or that feeling, not necessarily based in any truth. But the objective is to become so clear on what is the truth. Not to become better than another or anybody, but just to simply streamline the sounds that we hear inside our head. So that then the sounds that we hear make absolute and perfect sense more consistently. And that consistency is so incredibly precious as you find it. Because this is momentum, this is forward moving, this is softening, this is grounding information. So if there's any truth to what this wisdom tradition is saying, even if there's any truth to what I'm saying, the intelligence which is beyond mind is all pervading and all supporting. So if I just simply let go, I should, in theory, land and experience exactly that which I should be experiencing in this moment in time. But how does one know? I believe strongly that there is a very distinct yes-no. And it is that simple. Yes, no. Yes, no. Yes, no. And we know instantaneously. But when it's no, meaning the alignment is not absolutely perfect within this very fine observation that I'm speaking of, then all that means is just greater engagement is needed. Increased percentages, potentially, of trust must be accessed in order to allow the individual's mind, including the body, including all of the systems that are encapsulated within that body, to simply find the thread of alignment. But understanding that it comes through consistency. So all of life experience, if we bring it to a place of mind as being the observatory of all that we are experiencing, we must begin to enable the mind to no longer feel the need to be afraid. And that piece of fear that we are continuously working through, and when I say continuously, I mean on an absolute level. It's a continuous moving through. And I'm not necessarily talking about individuals, but I'm talking about the collective. But because we are all individuals a part of the collective, that means that we are a part of that fear. So it's on a continuous level that we have to enable the mind to rest in such a way that it does not hold on to fear. Because immediately as we enter into the experience of fear, we're actually moving away from trust. And this is a very fine line that exists between the two, fear and trust. And this is further accentuated when one's foundation doesn't feel solid and strong. So what then prepares a foundation, what sustains a foundation, void of any physical anything that one can do, is a meditation practice. And the reason why I say that is because meditation is the prime opportunity that one can take just to get real with themselves. Real. The Q&A that happens usually at the beginning part of a meditation or at the end in a bit of a contemplation is a Q&A that often doesn't happen on the outside. Or if it happens on the outside, it falls onto deaf ears or judgment. So the meditation process that you are engaging with, and it really is a process, meaning that it's in its perfection, it's not perfect right when you close your eyes. But within that process, we are actually dissolving the mechanism which is creating your fear. The mechanism itself which is creating the fear. Because often the fear that we're experiencing is not rational. Or maybe it is. But if it is, then it's easy to work with because all we have to do is correct that which is causing fear and then it will dissolve. But I think that we can all agree that the fear mechanism which is percolating its experience is not always rational. When we start to look really closely at what is causing one's fear. And it starts to become a vicious cycle, a loop. And this experience of fear is not necessarily always direct, but it's reflective. It's reflective meaning the language that one uses around their ability, as an example. I didn't do a really good job. I don't know if I'm the best. Maybe I didn't quite sit right. Oh, maybe I didn't put my gaze quite right when I was sitting in meditation. All these little bits and pieces that at first glance don't seem like they come from a fear-based experience often are. So in the quiet place of one's own meditative experience, when the opportunity arises for a Q&A that often happens at the beginning, or at the very end, even after your meditation time is technically finished, but you're just simply resting in contemplation, is so incredibly important. Enabling one to come to the answers for themselves in alliance to that higher form of consciousness that we were talking about before. Ideally, we can and we must and we actually are connected to this higher form of consciousness. But it's the level of conscious awareness that we have that we really need to increase percentages. Does this make sense? This level of conscious awareness that we have to the fact that we are already connected. And that's where that whole oneness concept comes in. We are all one. What are you guys all worried about? We're all one. We're already here. What's going on? We are all one. We don't need anything else. But yet we do. So maybe we are two at the moment, along with being one. And that separateness is not a bad thing, but this is called the opportunity for evolution to occur. So you are on the front lines of human evolution in the form of consciousness, in the field of consciousness. And your work is being directly a prime influencer on your own individual evolution. But just as, maybe even more important, your effort is influencing the collective. So if you can see out into the world and say, wow, there's a lot of fear going on, in order to resolve that solution is found on the inside, one individual. Imagine if all individuals in the world did this work for themselves. What would happen? This is an ideal, but it just gives some perspective on the importance of the individual just focusing on themselves for the betterment of humankind. And we observe this all of the time. Attempt to ask somebody to do something differently and see what happens. Attempt to give some constructive feedback. Go to your parents' house and start to give them a talk on consciousness and see what happens. It's very challenging in some cases, not mine. My parents are amazing. But I know for sure that it's a challenge. So that's a slight example of what happens when we attempt to change the world from the outside. As marginal shifts occur. But if we change the world from the inside, I'm not talking about any world, I'm actually talking about your world, from the inside first, then this is the foundational piece that we need that goes beyond any commerce that is possible, beyond any relationship that would create this foundation. It is following a very old, well-worn path of self-reliance. And this self-reliance begins to overflow with its joy, with its abundance, enough that you can just start to give it away. Willingly, you want to. Why not? What are you going to do with this overflow? Naturally existing. Just like meditation naturally takes you to that joy, to that abundance, to that ecstatic feeling. Void of a decision which is being made. But at that same moment in time, we must be conscious of it. We are on the choosing path, remember. Not because you meditate, but because you're alive, because you're a human being, you are inundated with choice. So now we must consciously choose, which then enables all of the senses to take part. If your mind thought says, well, I'm going this way, but you kind of also want to go the other way, this becomes very challenging. And this is once again the importance of becoming quiet and sitting in meditation so you can understand for yourself what this path is and start to develop the passage. Literally, within the nostril, the alignment that takes the breath from the outer environment into the inner environment. What does that passage feel like? On a very intimate level that you are entering into, that you are strengthening your understanding of the path that exists just beyond that for yourself. Trust on the outside is influenced positively, heavily positively, because of the very consistent feedback loop which you've created. And that feedback loop is heat-seeking missile, ideally, on truth. So all storylines dissolve. Not just within oneself, but the storyline that another attempts to express to you. So that then we just maintain the alignment to this consistency of truth. So with this continual effort, we begin to marginalize the storylines that are causing disruption within one's own mind, which is increasing the ability to retain peace and well-being. And that peace that is cultivated, the well-being that is being experienced, is how an individual deepens the meditation. That's how you deepen your meditation, is through creating this harmony within your life. The how does one create harmony within life? Well, that's through meditation. Other modalities, of course, but here we're talking about meditation. Through meditation, we are teaching ourselves how to create greater peace and harmony through how we engage with this individual that you experience on a constant, and with the other individuals that come in and out of your life. That meditation is in kin to that higher form of consciousness. The same example. The how exists in the doing, in the engagement. So the microcosm to this development of a connection to higher form of consciousness exists within meditation. Just like the microcosm of all of this planetary life exists within your individual experience of life. So we don't ever need to go very far to reach the next height, to get to the next rung, and then pull down and in the understanding which is necessary to become embodied. So you see these beautiful Taoist monks or Tibetan monks, and they're absolutely content. And they're incredibly worldly, and they've barely even stepped foot out of their monastery or ashram or a particular mountain range. They have not seen much of reality, but yet they're in tune with it all. This is the reasoning for that. The microcosms which exist, which are the representatives of the macro. And this keeps just going all the way out to this cosmic level. What happens above, planetarily, happens below, within one individual. Proven to us simply through the waxing and waning of the moon. We are heavily influenced by that. Mercury retrograde is just settled down, but we have Saturn going into retrograde now. We are completely influenced by that, but none of us even know what Mercury retrograde is. I mean, in this room, but on a planetary level, we have no clue. But somehow, orchestrated through some understanding, there is an intensity which is occurring during Mercury retrograde. An opportunity in the form of a rewind to do things differently. If we're not fully conscious of that, it feels like things are hitting us square in the forehead with challenge. And we're wondering, well, why is this happening to me again? This is just last week. Why is this happening to me again, like this again? Why does this keep going on again? Well, what's interesting is the planets are like holding units of energy, unbiased. And these are the theories around astrology. And as the planets move around in their orbits, it sends energy back down onto the planet, unbiased, just simply happening. And when it meets the individual, it's the individual's placement in relation to mind, in relation to life, in relation to that planet, that will determine the challenge or ease that they have during that time period. So in one individual's perspective, Mercury retrograde is an incredibly challenging time. But in another person's perspective, it's actually the best opportunity ever. Because of the rewind, we get a chance to do it differently than we did it before. And in that shift, transformation begins to occur. The intensity of your effort is going to determine how much transformation is going to occur during that time. Now, this is everything, in my opinion. Everything meaning all aspects of one's experience, if challenged, potentially one must do it differently. And I know that's simple logic, but when put into the world of one's personal mind with emotion and thought and personality, it tends to get a bit clouded. That logic becomes clouded quite quickly. So to remind ourselves again and again is actually really important. How do we conduct ourselves? How do we hold ourselves? How do we present ourselves into the world? Understanding that the world is external and internal, and that quite potentially your internal reality is much more important than your external reality. Even further punctuated by the potential of your mind being non-local. And what that means is that there's no defining point as to where we can say, okay, this is where all the information is coming from to produce the experience of mind. So that then we can take the experience of mind and expand it across a room, across a city, across a body of individuals, potentially even across the whole planet. And what that means is that the quality of thought that one holds within one's mind has a direct influence on their external reality. And if there's any truth to that, even if it's 1%, it might be worthwhile to really examine one's own thinking style, the dialogue, and begin to consciously shift out of those styles or dialogues that are no longer serving you, that you can recognize, and see if that begins to change the tone of the environment on the external reality, whether challenges begin to become less, opportunities begin to grow, ease, tranquility, all of these wonderful words. But we will not know if there's any truth to what I'm saying unless we actually engage with it. Not all of it, just the pieces that really landed for you, that resonate. That would be a clear point and path of instruction that then you can follow. But know that your entire body is a part of the experience of life, and that life is a mystery, but what we're leaning towards as a human species is that there's something greater than that which I experience as my mind. And it's coupled with the opportunity for the individual experiencer to have a full realization of what it is. But the very clear ask from this unknown is that you must experience it. You must find it. You must understand it for yourself, which I believe is a very good thing. I don't need anyone telling me what to do. Any questions?
Rameen.
Hello.
Namaste. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
Good. That's so strange that everything you said today like resonated with me on such a highly relevant level. And actually, that's what I wanted to ask about too. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to share what I experienced in the last couple of weeks and just kind of get your thoughts on it. So I went to a yoga retreat, and I learned a lot about myself. And then for some reason, there were things that I took from the retreat and I started to apply them every day since I got back from the retreat. And it felt really good. Like it took me somewhere different, and I think I was at a level where I was finding contentment with everything from the inside. I was no longer looking for to be satisfied based on my external environment, but to find that internally.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that was helped a lot by like a lot of small changes I made, like more ways to practice that were connecting with me. And so it worked really well. Like it felt good, and then I was just doing it. And then on the weekend or just recently, it kind of slipped, and I just kind of lost that connection for some reason. And then like the simple example is that when it snowed one time, I felt actually sad about that. But then 2 days earlier when it snowed, I felt content with it. Mm-hmm. So that exact example showed me that, I kind of stepped out of what I had before. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure. I'm trying to understand for myself why did I step out of it, and I think I've just tried to practice more, get back into my practice a little more, and try to stay connected with what I had found. Mm-hmm. But I'm just trying to understand what did I experience, and then what led for me to kind of step away from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good question, and the question about why you stepped out of it is a good one for you, because I think that you probably hold the answer to that. And it's very natural. It's very normal. That's part of our privilege. We're allowed to be the lightweight and weave on and off that path. But coming onto the path, we recognize so clearly why we want to be there. And then as we step off the path, we also get a chance to realize so clearly why we want to be on the path. So it's stepping off the path is often really easy, and stepping back on the path can also be just as easy. Now, what you felt, again, is a good question for you. I believe that you could tell me clearly what you felt that made it so strong for you wanting to connect to aspects of a practice to make it long-lasting. And that's what it is really, is we must, once we connect to an experience that is truly taking us into greater transformation, then we must become consistent with it. Because like everything, we're made up of muscles. We have muscles that we must strengthen. So the stronger that contentment muscle is, the ability to rest in the experience of content, then the more long-lasting, with just a little bit of toning every once in a while. But at the beginning stage, no matter how long that beginning is, we must be very consistent with it. And that consistency is actually everything. Mm-hmm. Now, to experience sadness because it's snowing, I think is also okay. Because it's supposed to be spring. And one time fine, but now 2 times, come on, it's a little bit much. So I believe that that's okay, because emotion is really important and natural. So no matter how evolved one gets, one still feels sad and happy and all of those emotions, but it's clean. So it's a very clean burn, and you might have recognized that, where you just felt sad without the storylines. And that's really what we're attempting to get to, is experience without stories. And if there is a storyline, well, then it's supportive. It's not draining you or tearing you down. It's building you up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. Thank you. I'll think about that some more.
You're very welcome.
One more question about that. Like, is there a way to connect what I experience and then this journey of being on and off the path to that word of space? Because when you were talking about space today, it kind of resonated, but I didn't understand it fully.
Mm-hmm. Well, the quality of space that I speak of is the space between you and I. So whether you're on the path or off the path, you have that quality of space. On the path would mean that you are consciously developing awareness as to what that space is. You're consciously engaged with it. Off the path would mean that you've turned that switch off and you're mindless. You're not engaged with it at all.
Okay.
So that quality of space is everything all of the time. Just like we are always connected to that higher form of consciousness all of the time. But because they're so simple, so fine, and so constant, it's very easy for our mind to look at something else and say, oh yes, this is interesting and important. But if we just slow it down by a fraction of a millisecond, so that's not even a full second, but a fraction of a millisecond, that's enough time just to keep steady with the quality of space as it's emerging, as it's sustaining itself. And then if we couple that with the development of the nasal passages, the airway, the lungs, and the nervous system, then we're in constant feeling connection to the quality of space, because it's coming into the body and leaving the body. Does it make sense?
A little bit, yeah.
Perfect. That's all we need, is just that little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Namaste. Thank you very much for creating this space.
Thank you.
I was just going to talk a little bit about just coming into spring and having a whole school year. It's been a challenging year, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's actually drawn me more into my experience because it's made me, or it hasn't made me, but I've been what's got me through it is acknowledging moments at a time as they're kind of happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, like, all my work is kind of coming into this, like, culminating into seeing these final products and stuff, so it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about going into spring and transition and, like, what I'm sure a lot of people are going through, like, moving into new times of life, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, spring is a wonderful time because winter is also very beautiful. Every year I gain an appreciation for winter more and more and more and more and more and more. Wintertime is dormancy. Wintertime is a huge letting go. Winter is, in the most beautiful of ways, a dying period when you look at it. But at that same time, it's crystallized in beauty, poised and ready for something to happen, and that something which happens is in spring. So this springtime is a renewal of inspiration often. And I think that everyone feels that. And with this renewal which is occurring, we can consciously decide to become a part of it and allow the cellular body to really connect and resonate with the experience of spring and allow the spring to uplift us into summer. Just being a part of it. So being a part of it means observing the experience of renewal. So going to the park and sitting by the river and watching as the ice breaks apart and melts and floats away, and as the water is high and then it goes a little bit lower with each week as it passes, and how the buds on the trees begin to emerge. And that's the same as you. You're emerging with those buds on a mind level, on a consciousness level, even on a physical body level. The body begins to find a new vibrancy and health because we're finally getting the warmth of the sun and the cool breeze moving through us. And as we inhale and exhale, it becomes incredibly vibrant but vibrating to the rhythms of nature itself, moving in and out of the body. Whereas oftentimes in the winter, we're inside and we're vibrating to the rhythms of what's happening inside, which isn't a bad thing. But when we step outside, it's this complete renewal occurring. So to take that and use it as fuel, again, like the ancients did, they observed nature and then they used nature to their advantage, seeing that they, just like we, are not separate from nature, ever. We are not separate ever. We are nature. So we actually go through the same cycles. But because our mind is so strong and so occupied with evolution of all kinds, including the material building and developing wealth and the job responsibilities, we sometimes forget that we are so connected, and we are one with all of that that's happening on the outside. So that's what I say about that. Take it on as an experiment for the remainder of this spring and see how vibrant you can make yourself.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any final questions?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
It's an amazing
I
sun
know.
there.
It's a good spot there.
I appreciated what you talked about Mercury waning, which I was not aware of. Although when I look at what's going on in my life, I can see a connection. And I think it's just another indication of all the various things that go on in life that we have no conscious connection with. And I think the practice of meditation and yoga and breathing helps us to connect with those things that we are not fully conscious of, and allows us to bring them into our consciousness so that we are able to express what it is we're here to express.
I agree. So then what to do with that?
That's the question we all ask ourselves, I guess. Yes.
And I believe it is that continuation of a continuation of a continuation. You are a continuation of a continuation.
Thank you.
Perpetually continuing. Even when we think that we're stopped in one spot in complete inertia, we're actually not. We're actually still moving and continuing. It's just that focus point that we're looking at is inertia. But within that, there is constant movement. So it's cleansing, polishing the lens of your perception again and again and again, which meditation provides. That enables you to see, again, the truth of who you are and why you're here and the work that's in front of you. And it's just those moments, the moment as it arises. Oftentimes we only have really one clear, strong thing that we must accomplish in our life. There's just one thing that we have to learn. But that one thing is spread out amongst every experience that we have. So if we can just analyze ourselves in a very sweet and kind way and find out what is that one thing, and then hone the skill of developing through that, then the rest unravels quite nicely.
Yes. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Shall we sit? Keeping the eyes closed, let's bring full deep breaths into the body. Keeping the eyes closed, bring your gaze into the space just there in front of you. Soft intensity, maintaining the integrity of the space, uninterrupted. We can get there, uninterrupted by any distraction. Starting now. Keeping the eyes closed, soften the gaze. And then very slowly and gently allow the eyes to open. So to offer just a little bit more direction in developing a very clear understanding to what this higher form of consciousness is in relation to mind, to what the truth is in relation to the story, this direction is found within quiet. The most absolute, pristine quiet that we can get to on the inside. That's where we're going to find this depth of understanding that then turns into a realization, a true aha. Something new, not something from the past, but something new to you. Aha is found within the absolute quiet, which means void of this languaging which you're used to. We want to get to that place. Within your meditation, if there's language and story, let it dissolve. And just keep doing that and recognizing the space between you and that which you are observing as true. You are observing that, so therefore you are not that. So then what are you? Sense into it. What does it feel like? Not necessarily what does it intellectually acknowledge as, but what does it feel like? What does it sound like if it was free just to express it however it wishes to be heard? That level that is beyond, deeper, higher than this operating mind and its dialogue. These are very reliable sources of developing clear answers. Something new, not already done before. A new approach, a new perspective, a new lens. And that should be refreshed each moment, so the lenses are always clean and clear. Thank you very much, everyone. Namaste.